投身科技创新生动实践，以实际行动展现科技女性在助力应对全球性挑战、完善国际创新治理体系中的智慧与力量，以科技进步增进人类福祉。再次感谢各位嘉宾的到来，祝愿本次活动取得圆满成功。谢谢大家。
非常感谢我们叶卫红常委为我们大家的介绍啊。我想呢，绍兴是因为女性在中国的历史上，在世界的舞台上更为杰出。谢谢您，谢谢您和您的同事 ，Thank you。下面让我们有请中国科学院大学党委常委、副书记、副校长王艳芬校长来和大家分享。王艳芬校长从事土壤生态学研究已经长达30年，为草地可持续发展做出了巨大的贡献。从2018年开始，他就担任中国科学院大学的副校长。有请王院长，有请。
Distinguished Professor Fang Xin, distinguished Ms. Beata Trankman, Ms. Srimati Rao, distinguished Mr. Ye Weihong, Ms. Xie Xin, and Professor Wang Hong. Dear colleagues, good morning. I'm Wang Yanfen from University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. It is a great honor to be invited as a female scientist to participate in 2023, the dialogue on women in science. Especially this dialogue take place during the World Women Scientists Conference. Today's dialogue aims to encourage greater female participation in science and raise further awareness of women's vital roles in technological innovation. Therefore, it holds significant importance. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the United Nations Development Program Office in China, China Women's Association of Science and Technology, and the Shaoxing Municipal Government for hosting this event and for their gracious invitation. This opportunity has allowed me to engage in in-depth discussions with female scholars from diverse fields, as well as the representatives from universities, research organizations, and business from various countries. Together, we will explore how to enhance women's contributions in the realms of science and innovation, pulling in more wisdom and strength. I would like to deliver the following part of my speech in Chinese. 下面我特别想跟大家分享最近的2个消息。我不知道，可能第一个消息正像方新院士刚才提到的，关于2023年度的诺贝尔奖。今年的诺奖诞生了3位女性科学家，这其实是全球女性的骄傲，也极大的鼓舞了全球女科学家参与科学的这个信心。但是可能大家很少去关注，在经济学奖当中，这是第3位获得经济学奖的女性，而且这也是首次一位女性单独获得经济学奖，之前都是共同获得的。所以这则消息呢，实际上对我们来讲，因为诺奖作为科技界的最高的奖项，它实际上是科学的顶峰啊。如果女性在这里面，无论是在这个物理学奖、 生物医学奖还是经济学奖，因为这是自然科学和社会科学共同来享有的。那么女性在攀登科学高峰当中是有自己的这个地位的，我觉得这是一个消息，这是两周之前。那么这是1周之前，2周之前10月1号，中国科技界正在攀登另一个高峰，就是在第3级青藏高原进行第2次综合科学考察。10月1日，科考队登上了卓奥友峰，同时将自动气象观测站架到了8201米，这是地球的一个高峰。那么人类将自动气象站架到8200米，实际上也是攀登的一个高峰。更值得一提的是，在去年也是这个科考队攀登了珠峰，也把气象站架到了这个珠峰。在这个科考的队伍当中，有大批的女性。我本人呢是作为生态系统和生态安全任务的共同的这个负责人，参加了这科考。据不完全统计，这次参加科学考察的女性科学家达到了1900余名，约占科考队员的1/3。大家都知道，青藏高原是地球第3级，其实工作条件是非常艰苦的，唯有不畏艰险、献身科技这样的科学家，尤其是女性科学家，才能够坚持在这样一个极地来开展科学研究。这1/3的女性科学家，她们的足迹遍布了冰川、草地、荒漠、沼泽，取得的丰硕成果支撑了区域可持续发展。所以这2则消息，一座是科学的高峰，一座是地球的高峰，2个角度都有2个方面，这个高峰上都有女性的身影这是我觉得我们今天召开这样一个会议，向社会各界来共同对话。我们之间需要对话，我们跟社会各界需要对话，我们那些正在走向科技研发道路的这个女性科技工作者，我们也需要对话。我想，如今越来越多的女性勇于进入传统被认为由男性主导的自然科学领域开展的研究工作，她们在基础理论、应用技术、工程实践等各个方面都做出了杰出的贡献，充分彰显了巾帼力量。1/3，刚才我注意到，在这个我们白雅婷这个主任和方欣院士的报告当中，都提到了1/3这个数字。1/3也是我这几年在观察女性与中国科技、女性在世界科技中的贡献和作用里面经常见到的数字。根据联合国教科文组织2021年的统计结果，女性研究人员在科研队伍中占比全球平均值为1/3。目前中国有约4000万名女性科技工作者，刚才方书记也提到，大概占到我们国家的41.5%。这一比例呢，在世界上是居于前列的。特别值得一提的是，在中国当下的高等教育当中，女性的比例它的优势更加凸显。我掌握的数字，在中国的本科和硕士毕业生当中，女性的比例均已超过55%，在博士毕业生当中，这个比例也达到了42%。我所在的中国科学院大学是全国规模研究生培养规模最大的这个教育机构，在读的6万余名硕士和博士研究生当中，女性比例已经分别达到了38.7%和39.9%。国科大的情况呢，在中国是一个缩影。女性在高等教育优势的这种凸显，意味着女性科技人才队伍的数量和在全国的占比将会进一步增长。所以从这个基础数据，我们可以预测未来更多的女性将这个进入到 科学技术和我们这个企业研发的领域当中。女性科技力量的规模提升和结构优化，得益于中国政府、企业和社会组织等各方力量对女性发展的关注和重视。2011年，科技部和全国妇联联合印发了关于加强女性科技人才队伍建设的意见。2021年，科技部会同全国妇联等12家部门印发了支持女性科技人才在科技创新中发挥更大作用的若干措施。从国家层面，为女性科技人才成长进步、施展才华、发挥作用，创造了更好的政策环境。从2010年开始，国家自然科学基金委员会在自然科学基金项目的申请、评审、结题以及专家评审组的组建方面，制定了一系列的促进中国女性科研人员成长发展的政策引导措施。例如，我们在人才项目当中，对女性的这个年龄的限制，和男性相比，向后推迟了3到5岁。考虑到我们生育期、哺乳期的影响，这项工作极大的促进了或者推动了女性在这个成长期加入到优秀团队和优秀人才队伍当中的这个占比。同时，基金评审工作当中也有同等条件下女性优先政策的原则。此外，各级地方政府、各类女科技工作者组织和企业也通过设立奖项、搭建学术交流平台、实施针对女性的支持计划等方式，在培养女性科技领军人才方面发挥了积极作用。我知道我在的学术团体专门都有女科技工作者协会、女科技工作者交流的一些这个平台这些措施呢，实际上营造了女性科技人才发展的良好氛围，让女性科技工作者获得更好的职业环境和发展条件。其实更主要的就是我们不仅让社会意识到他们要关注女性，其实更主要的是让女性意识到要关注自己，要让自己有更好的动力去参与到这个职业生涯的发展当中，尤其是投身到科技创新的活动当中，从事科学研究。当然，尽管如此，女性科研工作者高位缺失的现象仍然突出，杰出女性科学家的比例还比较低，在中国和世界范围内都是如此。刚才提到了诺奖设立了到今年是122年，其中女性获得诺奖的比例只有3.9%。在中国相关国家级人才计划入选的专家学者当中，女性仅占10%，这反映出只有很少一部分女性可以成长为学术引领者。这种人才剪刀差的现象，并非源于女性不够优秀、缺乏能力，它暴露出的是女性科技人才在职业发展中面临的瓶颈问题。科学研究是一条充满艰辛、布满荆棘的道路，科学家是没有性别差异的，但是他们遇到的困难，他们在现实生活和这个科学研究道路上面临的问题是不一样的。女性除了科研压力，还面临来自家庭、生育、评价体系等多重压力。很多女性科技工作者降低了科研期许，甚至中断科研事业。这些职业发展问题无法解决，女性的正常成长就会受到影响。一些本该站上金字塔顶尖的女性科技人才因此被埋没，这也是女性个人的遗憾，同时也是国家、社会和整个人类的遗憾。因为这些女性科技工作者，她们受到了良好的教育，她们有着个人的这个成长的愿望，但是因为外部条件不具备，实际上是对人力资源的浪费。世界发展需要科技，科技进步需要女性。女性细致坚韧的特性是从事科学研究的优势所在。女性独特的思维和视角是科技创新不可或缺的重要元素。性别不是科研能力的分界线，这就是刚才提到的 男女是在这个方面是没有差别的。性别更不应该成为女性实现科学理想的制约。在科技飞速发展、对人力资源提出更高要求的时代，支持科技领域女性的发展变得前所未有的重要。我们要鼓励女性进入科学、技术、工程、数学专业，鼓励女性在实验室、科研机构和大学中发挥领导作用。同时，我们要努力消除科技界对女性的刻板印象，让玻璃天花板被打破，让女性真正发挥潜力。更为重要的是，女性科技工作者要增强自信，顺势而为，迎难而上，突破自我。同时，我们要在下一代建立起性别平等的意识，让要求改变的声音不仅来自女性，更来自整个社会。希望通过今天的对话活动，能让社会更加关注女性科技工作者，让更多的女性科技工作者通过自己的努力，通过学术创新，在学术舞台上展示非凡的创造力和影响力，让女性推动科技更好的服务经济、服务社会、服务人类。相信女性在知识创造当中蕴含的力量，在新的时代能够迸发出新的火花。最后，祝各位工作顺利，身体健康，谢谢大家。
谢谢您的分享，我们了解到了很多您的一些思考，无论是从国际的领域，还是从国内的氛围，提到高位缺失的问题，确实是值得进一步的探讨。接下来，让我们有请另外一位主旨演讲嘉宾，南方科技大学研究生院院长、南方科技大学材料科学与工程讲席教授汪红院士。汪红院长呢是在电子工程领域有着杰出成就的女性科学家，是国际电气与电子工程师协会的会士。同时呢，她也积极的推动女性在科技创新当中发挥重要的作用。接下来，让我们有请汪红院长。
好，尊敬的白亚萍女士、方欣院士、王艳芬校长，尊敬的各位嘉宾、各位代表、各位姐妹啊，大家上午好。我是汪红，来自南方科技大学，非常荣幸呢，收到这样一个邀请啊，参加我们这个世界女科学家大会啊，尤其是今天这个她力量论坛啊，邀请我做一个分享。我想呢，我自己在这个女性发展和科技创新方面啊，也有一些思考，给大家汇报一下我自己的体会。那我本人呢，实际上是17年加入南方科技大学啊，之前我在西安交大学习和工作了差不多30年。那今年我有幸获得算是一个我们领域的一个大奖吧，是 IEEE 这个协会，因为是比较大的一个协会，尤其我们这个领域有个铁电学的成就奖，这个奖是83年设立的，每年呢学术界全球就1位获奖人，我是时隔21年以后第2次获得这个奖励的女性中国学者，而且是首位那个华人女性。所以我觉得很荣幸啊，也感到还是比较自豪，因为我代表女科学家啊，站到这个一个世界级奖项的这个颁奖的这个舞台上啊，我是觉得我是代表我不是我自己，也代表我们中国的这个女科技工作者，代表我们女科学家去获得这样一个奖项。那我发现啊，我准备今天这个演讲的时候啊，我这英文这个 woman 啊，和我们这个我们中文啊，非常的很巧啊，字母上是完全一样的。那我们今天在座的很多的这个女性科技工作者，其实我们都有自己的一些榜样啊。我们在自身的这个科研工作和自己的生活中间，其实一路走过来，我们其实会面临到各种各样的压力 比如说有晋升的压力，婚姻育儿，还有我们自身的信心因为我们面临很多很多的挑战所以呢，我们也在不断的思考，作为女性科技工作者，作为女科学家这样一个群体，在社会进步、科技的这个发展我们怎么样进一步发挥我们的力量尤其是在现在这样的一个环境下。刚才呢，其实那个王艳芬校长他也讲到了这个数据，我这有更详细的一个数据就是从我们高校的中国高校的这个学生数量来看，我们女生的比例其实在本科生里面超过50%了53%，然后我们到硕士生的时候呢，我们这个女生的比例也是持平的，但是大家发现没有，到博士生就下来了，到42%了这个说明呢，这个继续深造要选择投身这个科学研究的这个女性的数量就有所减少反映出来一个越往上走，这个人数越少的这样的一个趋势。那这样一个趋势呢，不光反映在学生的这样一个比例上，在更高层次的人才上面我们可以看到在2013到2021年连续5届的我们中国科学院和中国工程院两院院士的甄选过程中呢，每届的女科学家的数量都是个位数比例呢低到只有5%在2023年现任的这个两院院士里，女科学家只有107人，占6%。在高水平大学里面我们的 C9 没有一位女校长，42所首批的双一流大学里面只有2位女校长所以呢，这个也反映出来越往上走我们这个女性的这个越少这样一个趋势。还有一个数据呢，这是美国的一个统计数据，也反映出来从高中、大学、博士，再到这个研究岗位和顶级学术职位，一直到落奖女性的这个比例从49%慢慢的就下跌到3%了所以呢，在科学研究的这个职业生涯中间，这个女性难以持续的获得更好发展的这个现象还是非常明显的。落奖的，刚才那个王校长也提到，我主要是统计了一下这个在自然科学类的尤其自然科学类对女性的这个好像挑战比较大一点。物理学奖、化学奖还有生理医学奖3大奖项里面，物理学奖只有5名女性这么100多年，占总人数的2%，而且这些获奖人呢，超过一半是在生理和医学奖这2个领域呢从事的女性可能要多一点。总体来说，女科学家总体获奖人数获奖人次只有26次其中居里夫人还获得过2次这是我们非常杰出的一位女性的物理学者。那可以，而且我们最近就是这4届占了6人次。那大家可以想象，那在之前这个女科学家要获得这个自然科学类的落奖，那是非常非常的困难。那是不是说我们女科学工作者真正在这些自然科学、在物理这些类别的这些学科上，我们真正的科研贡献就比不上男性科学家呢？实际上从历史上有很多例子我也找到2个例子一个呢是这个 DNA 的这个结构呢，实际上是1962年获得落奖，但是其中有一位对这个 DNA 结构做出重要贡献的一位女性，叫罗莎琳德·富兰克林，她的工作是被低估的，因为第1张 DNA 晶体衍射的照片是她拍出来的但她没有得到这个落奖。还有一位呢，就是最近曼哈顿计划大家也看这个电影也是非常很受欢迎。在曼哈顿计划中间唯一的参与的一位女性就是吴健雄这个我们当然大家都很熟悉她实际上也是值得获得落奖的，她的成就也是非常显著的，对吧？她用实验证实了那个杨振宁、李政道提出的宇称不守恒定理。所以呢，在历史上有很多女性的工作她是被低估了甚至呢有些时候成果还被剥夺了就不算了，这是导致这个女性后续难以进步发展的一个重要原因。还有一个方面就是社会大众对女性的偏见和刻板印象也会影响我们的女性逐步的往上走在走到这个中间过程中间各种压力各种这个选择，尤其是女科研人员 尤其是那个结婚生孩子以后，很多可能会选择回归家庭，选择更轻松的岗位，可以有更多的时间来照顾家庭。同时还有一些传统的原因，社会和历史文化的原因，这些都是影响到我们女科学家或者女科学工作者进一步往上发展的制约因素。同时在这个社会环境中间我不知道大家注意到没有我准备这个报告我就发现我一看这个广告我觉得很多商业广告只要是什么名表名车代言人肯定是男性那但凡是油盐酱醋家居家务代言人都是女性这个好像我们女性生来这个角色这个主战场呢，我们就是应该在家庭，我们不是在职场，对吧？然后呢，甚至还有些用这种消费观念、商品来物化女性，把女性的就渲染成是消费者、依附者、物质的追求者这些都是非常可怕的一种宣传观念造成这样一个社会的氛围，其实对我们，尤其是从小孩子开始这个成长是非常不利的。但是实际上，我们女性也有很多优秀的榜样，对吧？我们在各行各业不管是政界、教育界、科技界，还有商界我们都有非常非常出色的女性而且女科学家，刚才那个王校长也讲到，我们有很多特质，我们在某些领域甚至比男性可能还更有优势这样的话，那我们接下来应该怎么做呢？那我觉得呢，就是说教育是最重要的我们真正就是说要提升我们这个女性从事科研的这样一个比例我们还是要从教育入手，尤其是要从基础教育入手我特别敬佩和特别感动的就是像有张桂梅校长这样一批从事基础研究的教育工作者，尤其是在偏远山区通过他们的这个努力，使很多在这些落后地区的女性呢，受到教育以后，她就走出了原来的她既定的最多是打个工，然后结婚嫁人生孩子就在这个就在她自己那个区域里这样转一生了通过受到教育以后，他们可以走出来，可以看到更大的世界可以实现自身的更大的这个价值现在呢，这个国际上今天也有很多我们那个国际的这个同事们同仁关心这个妇女的这个发展各个国家也非常重视这个女性科学家在教育科研中的这个作用比如说像北欧其实做的会比较好一点像瑞典48所这个大学里面，女校长就占到42%女教授呢也占到28%。荷兰呢是要求这个女性的教授讲师教师的比例要达到比如说30%以上，如果没有达到，那男性的这个教职就暂时停了，我们就先把女性的这个教授先招满。那个韩国也是要求2030年公立大学女性教授要达到25%其实韩国、日本跟中国，我们这个女性教授的在这个公立大学比例里是非常低的。2021年的美国的这个科学院士统计一下，他们这个当选120名，其中一半是女性就是前2天刚刚公布的这个澳大利亚技术科学与工程院2023年的新增院士这个特别振奋。我当时那天早上一起来看了一个新闻，就谈出这个33位院士里面有20位是女科学家其中1位还是我的师姐我就给她马上发了这个祝贺的这个信息我就特别振奋，占到了2/3也体现了这个澳大利亚科学界对女科学家的这个重视程度。那这些每一小步的举措和进步包括在全球范围内对我们女性科学家的这个发展，其实都是很大的一个帮助和鼓舞。那我们国家呢也出台很多政策这个我就不仔细讲，这个刚才那个方兴院士也都讲到了，国家出台的很多政策包括尤其是最重要的就是21年科技部的13部委和全国妇联7部门出台这2个重要文件以后，其实各个地方政府也都在响应，积极的出台一些政策来支持这个女性的这个发展。另外呢，在20大的这个报告里面也提出来就是说男女平等的一个基本国策这个是第3次把这个写到党代会的这个报告中间，所以国家从各个方面现在也是非常重视 也是在要提供一些具体的政策举措来支持和保障这个女性的发展包括一些生育支持政策，包括重视女干部的培养选拔都是为了就是实现这个女性自身发展平等的自立自强。在这样一个背景下呢，我们深圳市我们也成立了这个女科技工作者协会。我们在全国范围内可能是率先成立的当时广东省还没成立，我们是那个21年8月我们就开始成立这个女科技工作者协会。然后因为在深圳这样一个城市呢，我们的这个从事这个科技的女性科技工作者的这个数量也比较多上次那个我们去年开那个峰会的时候，科创委的一个副主任来给我一个数字，我就非常的振奋，就是说我们深圳市的从事这个科学研究的女性科技工作者的比例可能占到了45%左右所以这个是比较高的一个数字所以呢，我们这个协会呢也是想通过发挥这个平台的作用，来助推我们在深圳地区这些女性的科技事业然后为这个建设双区贡献我们的智慧和力量。我们开展了很多活动很重要的就是包括就是一些圆桌论坛，还有就是科普活动我觉得我们作为女性科学家或者科学工作者，我们还有一个很重要的就是做科普就是要让大众，要让更多的这些中小学、中小幼甚至的这些女孩子们要知道这个科学是很有趣的一个领域让他们不要畏惧让他们要去爱科学、学科学。那今年的落奖自然奖有2位这个女科学家获奖，我们也是非常的高兴和振奋尤其是很励志的，就是这个生理医学奖的这位获奖人卡里科他是一位匈牙利移民没有这个实验室，没有经费但是呢，他长期热爱这个科研事业，长期的坚持这个做这个研究最后实现自己的梦想。另外一位这个获奖者这个安妮雷耶兹他也是一位特别热爱自己事业的他说在30年以后，他仍然还在学习新的东西，仍然在改进仍然希望把自己的这个学术水平进一步的提升。所以呢，我们可以看出来，只有非常的热爱自己的事业，热爱自己的科研，从科研事业中获得极大的乐趣呢，才能够经历种种的这个挫败、失败最后做出成就这个是我觉得从事科学研究特别重要的一个特质。所以呢，我就也很喜欢这句话，也送给各位这个姐妹们经常我说共勉的这是王亚平我非常喜欢的一位这个也是女性杰出女性她说的这句话，我觉得也特别适合我们女性的科技工作者，就是因为热爱所以坚持，因为热爱所以执着，因为热爱让我有勇气克服重重困难走到现在。这次女科学家大会呢，我觉得也是提供了一个非常好的平台，也是有这样一个平台，我们可以互相交流沟通，发出我们自己的声音，也期望呢就是说不管从国家地方到我们各个的这样一个部门，能够有更好的更多的一些政策来鼓励女性的这样的一个发展从之前我们这个女科学家很稀有像一个高山一样然后能够变成层峦叠嶂、群峰并起有一大批女科学家能够涌现，能够实现他们的梦想，做出他们的这个成就，为社会贡献出来自己的智慧和力量，这样才是我们女科学家或者是女科技工作者我们共同的梦想那让我们一起共同努力我们为这个梦想继续奋斗。谢谢大家。
非常感谢您的分享，给到了我们很多让人感到鼓舞的案例以及我们优秀女性的代表。我们确实觉得呢，通过您所讲到的，通过在地方上我们一些女性科技工作者的协会，也可以有更好的机会，大家通过不同的方式，让我们的整个生态系统变得更加平衡。谢谢您因为热爱，我想我们心中都有关于这一份的热爱。下面呢，让我们有请接下来这位主旨演讲嘉宾。Next, we are delighted to welcome Smarite Ariel, the country representative of UN Women in China. She took office in the year 2019, yeah, and has been having 22 years of experiences in international development and humanitarian cause. So she will speak today on behalf of UN Women. Welcome.
Professor Fang Xin, Dr. Wang Yanfen, dear Beate, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. I don't think I can beat the previous keynote speech. That was very, very inspiring. But let me, on behalf of UN Women, start by thanking our partners, UNDP and China Women's Association of Science and Technology for co-organizing this very important event and inviting UN Women to attend and to speak. I think we've already heard from previous speakers, and I'll probably recycle the same concept slightly in a different way, that science is a beacon of human development. It offers us the tool to unlock mysteries of the universe, shape the world we aspire to live in, equip people with knowledge and skill set for solving global persistent challenges, including for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Yet, true progress to Sustainable Development Goal is only attainable when it is inclusive and equitable. Women and girls represent half of the brain power to achieve and to help us move forward. And I will not again remind ourselves of the gap. We've already heard the gap that exists in science, in STEM field, in technological innovation, and how women are being left behind. So to this, we must remember that it is not a coincidence that there is a gap. There are systematic barriers historically happening till date. That includes gender stereotypes, we've heard, that hinders young girls to even dream about being a scientist as a young girl. Underinvestment in research and development by women, heavy burden of care work at home, household responsibility, which women find very hard to juggle, balancing home, and inadequate female leadership in scientific role. We heard from Professor Wang how, as we look at people moving up, there are less and less women as leaders, especially in the physics, in AI, in IT, what we know is as hard science. Right? So obviously this has an opportunity cost, and the cost is not only for women and girls, the cost is for society. That's why we're here. What we know is that boosting women in science could lift women's earnings by 299 billion over the next decade. And we know when women earn, it's not only spent on themselves, it is spent on, of course, themselves, but their families, their children, and for the communities. So it's a wealth that we are generating for the greater prosperity of our societies. Nevertheless, in this challenging context, as we have heard, we do have women scientists being recognized, being awarded for the deserving research and innovation they have done. We've just seen Katalin Karikó, Hungarian-born chemist who won a Nobel Prize. We know of two, Yo-Yo, the Chinese physiochemist who shared the Nobel Prize in 2015, the first one, and I think the only one in China so far, yeah? But how do we make this a norm? Because we also heard about the gap that exists. Because the gap is too big, we need to have concerted effort, a focused effort, and an emphasis on really bringing a strong gender perspective into policies, practices, research, innovation, and leadership cultivation. So to this, I want to propose 4 consideration from a policy perspective, because this is a policy dialogue. So I, as UN Women, it's one of the work we do is really supporting on the policy agenda. So the first one is having targeted policies and approaches to level the playing field, because the gap is too big. If we don't have a very strong gendered policy, whether it's a preferential treatment of women, or we call a special temporary measure under CEDAW, we will not be able to close the gap. I think China really does offer very valuable experience in this regard. I actually had quite a few examples here, but several speakers spoke about this already, so I will not repeat. The 2021 13 ministerial and line department policy measure is a very important one. Likewise, in 2011, the National Natural Science Young Fund actually increased the age limit for young women scientists from 35 to 40. And what that led to, it's quite revealing, and this is the evidence we need to use, is that the percentage of women winning research grant in science increased from 33% to 43%, 10% in just 1 year. And I believe by next year, the age limit will be extended to 48. So this is already a progress from 2011, from 40 years, now going into 2024, it will be 48. That means more women will have access to research grant, to innovate, to showcase their potential and find solutions. I think policy measures as these are not only benefiting women, which is how immediately we think of it, but it will yield long-term and short-term results for the whole country. I really liked what Dr. Fang already said, that this is about creating opportunities that are fairer. And I think that's very, very important from a policy perspective. The second is targeted investment. When I say investment, resourcing for women-led research and development. There is simply not enough money being put to support women to do research and development. This is a major gap. What we also know that women are generally awarded, globally speaking, much lesser money. They're less likely to be promoted, even when they're in key roles. They tend to have a shorter and less well-paid careers. And they struggle to finance their tech startup. This is a big issue also with small and medium-sized enterprise and new startup that women want to lead. So obviously women with low career prospects are more likely than men to leave or be left behind. That's pretty normal, right? It's not because of women. These are the systematic barriers that we need to think about. So as a policy option, research institutions, academic institutions, governments, when designing research grant and putting resources, certain % of resources must be allocated to support women-led research and development. This is a good practice already seen in many countries, including in China. And it not only increases women's participation and leadership in scientific field, but it also diversifies science itself, because you have a diverse perspective bringing in different ideas and different way of looking at solutions. Last year, when UN Women and UNDP organized the same policy dialogue in Beijing, I remember we had the president of MIT from the United States joining, and she was talking about the history of MIT. And one of the things she said is in MIT, what they have identified and realized is that when women are given a chance to do research, the way they look at a challenge is simply different than the way a man researcher would look at it. So diversification in finding the complex challenges we have is really important, and diversity means more efficiency, more productivity. and diverse way to solve a problem. Third, I think we heard a little bit about this already. We absolutely need a transformative shift in the composition of teachers, educators, and leaders in the STEM field. There are simply not enough women, just to put it straight up. This is really important for young girls and young women. Really, really important. So what we know, that female teachers in STEM discipline break stereotype. And here is how they do it, because the students get to see, oh, you can be a female physicist, a female physics teacher. It gives hope and it gives aspiration. That is not only enough though. We also need to applaud, recognize, and put more efforts in making women scientists more visible. Somehow, in many events, we do not see enough female scientists sitting together. Somehow, the women scientists only pop in when it's women-related event, not just event on a science. So there is an imbalance in the way women are represented. I think media has a huge role to play in positive portrayal. We need to do more visibility, more sharing of their stories, because that's really important for young girls to look up and say, oh, I want to be like her in the future. It is possible to be like her. That hope goes a long way. Lastly, but not the least, in order to really truly capitalize on women's abilities and talents and skill sets, we must address the most commonly mentioned barrier that women encounter: balancing a professional life and managing a home. It's a challenge we've heard many times. Several speakers talked about this earlier today. Very often women slow down their career. Sometimes they stop working. Sometimes they make serious compromise not to choose to be in leadership role because of the demanding and competing priorities at home and expectation that women will do housework, elderly work, taking care of the sick, taking care of children. To remove this barrier, all of the society, each one of us has a role to play, including governments. What it needs is greater childcare investment in communities, companies. Childcare is a public service. It's not a free service to be carried by women. I was going to say UN women, but women, yes. So we need policy measures that can compensate women to do the work. That's one. The second is we need flexible working arrangement, workplace policies that really allow men and women to take responsibility at home. Parental leave that promotes and encourages fathers and men to do more for their children, and equal pay for equal work, nursing stations at workplaces. This would really help retain and boost women employment and participation and help them move up the career ladder. To this very important topic is engagement of men and boys in managing household responsibility and family needs. We can't truly address the imbalance we see in workplace between men and women, including in the STEM field, unless we address the imbalance at home in terms of who does the household duty. Excellencies, distinguished guests, 90% of the future jobs are going to require STEM skills, 90%. And these are going to be the most valued, the most sought after, most highly paid jobs. Enhancing women's competitiveness and capacity in scientific field bears importance not only for the national and global technological innovation processes, but also reducing pay gap, because many people will be working in these sectors, and lowering poverty rate, because many people will be employed in this sector. which are among some of the key SDG indicators. So with only 7 years away from the deadline of achieving sustainable development goals, we still have a long way to go, especially looking at the cross-cutting agenda of gender equality and women's empowerment and SDG 5. That's why we need a strong solidarity, we need strong partnership with robust policy considerations that have a very strong gender lens now than ever before. We also need data. Data is really lacking. Data helps us identify gaps, but it also is about sharing good practices, because the analysis can help us feed and replicate programs and what works in terms of policy and programming. As UN Women, of course, we are on a standby working alongside UNDP and our sister agencies to work together to push this agenda to truly mainstream and bring a strong gender lens in the science field to support women's leadership decision-making. Finally, please allow me to thank you, Beate, for inviting UN Women for the partnership and collaboration, and Dr. Fang Xing for extending the invitation for us to join this forum. I wish it a great success. 谢谢.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think we have learned a lot in terms of suggestions, targeted policies, targeted investment, make sure the society understands the policies that need to be taken to create the overall social environment, and also the advocacy that I bear in mind as a journalist, a female journalist as well. And I think your friendship together with Beate, the friendship between your two sister agencies in China, have certainly demonstrated the crystallization of how women can work together. So thank you, both of you. Thank you. Now, 现在呢，我们这次主旨演讲部分就结束了。我们非常感谢呢，刚才我们进行主旨演讲的各位重要的嘉宾，汪红院士、汪红院长、王艳芬院长，还有我们安思琪代表，非常感谢。下面呢，我们进入到我们的讨论环节。那这个环节呢，我们第一个讨论的题目就将是探索更加公平包容的科学政策环境 ，Charting ways towards more inclusive science policy and ecosystems。在我介绍这个讨论的内容和我们的嘉宾之前，我们在舞台上呢将进行一些具体的设置，所以呢，我们现在请我们的工作人员进行一下舞台方面设置，好吧？谢谢。我简单向大家来介绍一下我们第一个话题的讨论啊。刚才向大家介绍了话题讨论的名称：探索更加公平包容的科学政策环境 ，Charting ways towards more inclusive science policy and ecosystem。那 我们现在呢，其实大家在刚才的主旨演讲以及我们各位的重要发言当中，已经看到了我们这个在科技环境当中的高位缺失，特别是女性的这个高位缺失，以及呢我们在整体的社会和科技不断发展的这个环境当中，如何营造适当的政策来鼓励我们女性在科技方面的发展。等等这些重要的话题都需要更多深刻的讨论，以及拿出真正的行动的方案。所以接下来呢，我们就通过今天的几个我们的讨论环节来实现这样一个想法。从企业、社会和个人3个层面出发，我们将开展一场关于如何创建一个更加包容和科研体系的讨论。我们今天呢，台上将邀请企业、学者和专家，大家一起坐下来，给到我们更多的见解和想法。所以我们有请 my great honor to invite Holder Harrison, who is the Senior Country Representative of EuroX China. I hope I pronounced your name right. Please come up to the stage. 我们怎么就做呢？就是按照这个顺序就可以了。Please have a seat. Thank you. 非常高兴看到一位男性加入我们的讨论。Good to see a gentleman joining us. Liu Minghao, Executive Secretary General of Westlake Education Foundation. 有请刘女士。按照我们的照片就做就好，谢谢。Anastasia Sico, who is Associate Professor and from the Division of Natural Sciences to Kunshan University. Anastasia, please have a seat. Joe Peng, CTO of Luoxin Technology. The last panelist will be joining us online. That's Charing Choden, Regional Gender Specialist with UNDP Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. So thank you, all of you. We have one microphone. 我们有一个麦克风，是吧？So we have one microphone. You might want to just pass along. Yeah, thank you so much. Now, I would like to start by thanking all of you joining us for this wonderful and very crucial dialogue. And may I also highlight the participation of a gentleman joining this, because we need all of the genders in the world to help us on this important cause. Now, let's start by asking, what about where you are coming from? What about women's situation in science and technology? You're from Europe. So tell me more about data, as our friends have already advised, and tell me more about some of the basic policies that are available over there. Let's do a comparison and let's have inspirations, please.
Well, thank you very much, Tian. I am honored to be here today in such a great company. Yeah, I work for this initiative of the DT Research and Innovation of the European Commission. And in the European Union, there's quite a bit of discussion on women in science and policies, et cetera. But you always have to sort of start with having the right overview of what the situation really is, right? You know, you have stories and anecdotes, but you have to start with the data. And the data here is quite clear, actually. In the European Union, there's been like studies. We have something, for example, She Figures, which was last published in 2021, where we can see that about half of doctoral candidates in the European Union are actually women today, 48%, right? But only 32.8% of researchers are women. So this speaks for itself. So, you know, like 1/3 is women, but half of the graduates are female. So what's the reason? Yeah, what's the reason for this? Yeah, it's interesting. Like the number of researchers seems to be smaller than the number of graduates. And here in my network here in China, the percentage of women researchers from Europe is like 25%, which is even smaller. So like this is not really, doesn't really look that good, I have to say. And what is really noteworthy is what Wang Hong actually pointed out. She had like this graph earlier off from the US where it shows like that as you advance through the career stages, the gap widens, right? And it's the same in Europe. You start with 50-50 around doctoral degrees, but higher career stages, it will end up in about 1/5, in the highest level, 1/4 of the researchers are women, about 3/4 are male at the highest level of leadership in research. And you might think that this is maybe a generational lag or something like that. But if you just look at the history, then you would expect that these things would be kind of closing over time, and they kind of aren't. So it is noteworthy. We will definitely be discussing more about the policies, etc., like and why this is later on. But I think one of the statistics is very interesting in this regard. You can see in the figures that almost twice as many women are in sort of a precarious situation when it comes to job situation amongst researchers. They're doing part-time jobs, etc., compared to men. So that also sort of speaks a little bit to that story.
Thank you for sharing those important data. I think the advocacy that we have been talking about for the society to understand what needs to happen based a lot on the data that we can provide concretely to them. Also about Europe, we have another guest sitting here with us, Professor Sicko. So maybe you can also add your input in this conversation relating to data and others.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here today and share my experiences in the STEM field sector. Thank you again for the invitation. For those who do not know, Duke Kunshan is a Sino joint venture of Duke University and Yuhan University. It's a liberal arts and it's a very new university. Even in this new stage of development of this university, we do see a male-dominant environment across the university. In particular, the natural science department, the females again are underrepresented. There are very few associate professors. We only have one professor, female, in the physics department. And it just shows that even at the early stage of the development of this university, from the vice chancellor all through the chairs, there is a male dominant representation. And this is also, different factors, could be due to COVID, visa, that we can't recruit female scientists in the field of natural sciences. So compared to the speakers that have spoken before this panel, it shows the trend even at a new established university that males have the majority of senior positions compared to the females, even if they're equally with research output and experiences and exposure. We do see this trend happening at this institute as well.
Did you ask the policymakers in the university about this question? I'm sure you did, as vocal as you are.
I actually did during our interview that during the COVID-19, we had several women applying for the jobs, but they were selected for several different reasons for males. And I did mention, we should have a representation of women of chemistry and physics. What is the difference between this candidate and the male candidate? And there wasn't a very clear answer on their behalf. So I did stress this, and we should make a policy of having a balance of female representatives in the natural science department.
What you're talking about is not just one single case. It's actually a very common phenomenon that we have seen society-wise and also worldwide. So thank you for sharing your personal experience. I'm sure you have solutions for that, because that's what we are here for later a little bit. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, so let's move on. Not only in Europe, since both of you are coming originally from Europe, but also in the Asia Pacific region. What are the latest development? We have Mr. Turing with us online, and she would be able to. Ms. Choden, tell us more about your understanding of the latest data and facts related to our topic today, please.
So firstly, thank you to the organizers as well to the speakers here. It's a pleasure to be among very distinguished guests and esteemed panelists. As per the data in Asia Pacific and also the studies that has been conducted, at least from there seems to be a gender gap in STEM that, as you heard from all the keynote speakers, globally, the number is very less. And also, of course, in Asia Pacific, the number still remains less. Women only comprise around 23.9% of researchers, which is in the Asia Pacific, which is lower than the global average of 29.3%. And then again, as you see, this percentage further diminishes at every stage of advancement throughout STEM careers. For example, although good number of women and girls are enrolled in academic STEM courses, they remain poorly represented, as our earlier speakers also mentioned, in leadership roles. In a global survey that was conducted by UNESCO again in 2015, out of the 69 national science academics, women comprise less than 10% of members in almost half of the countries. So clearly, I think in the Asia Pacific also, there's a long way. I mean, there's a lot of progress happening. There are a lot of interventions, but when you look at the numbers, these are very low. Hence, it shows that women are far behind and miss the opportunities, right, as the world becomes highly, technology driven. And then it's also, I think, not only about representation, it's also about the economic necessity, I think, because women make up half of the population. And as we become technologically more advanced, we need to have women in that space for us, at the equal level playing field to benefit equally. And also mentioned by the keynote speaker, we are far behind in achieving the gender equality by 2030. And then STEM is one area that we are falling behind. So clearly, the numbers are not very high in the Asia Pacific region. Thank you.
All right. So we have pretty much the picture being set. Now is what can we do? I know all of you have your specific numbers, but let me also go to some case studies. Earlier, Anastasia told us about her university. Now let's also have a representative coming from Asia Pacific. 周博士，您是本身做科技企业的啊，科技企业的高管，您又是技术官，所以呢，我想这个问题问到您是最合适不过的了。那么怎么看待我们整体的，就是在科技企业，包括在我们的科技领域，女性目前啊，比如说中国的状况特别是工程技术，你本身也是在做工程技术，这里边女性的一个比例，以及大家现在面临的主要的挑战是什么？有请您简单的分享。
我还是先从我求学的时候感觉到的一个比例开始吧。就我本科的时候的专业是人工智能与自动化，然后
我们台上的其他嘉宾需要同传耳机吗 ？Do you need a simultaneous translation device? Do you need? Yeah, it will be better. 来给他们拿一下那个同传耳机啊。谢谢我们的工作人员辛苦了。周博士，您需要吗？
我不需要，
不需要。好 ，OK。Do you need the simultaneous translation device? Will be better. You can understand. Okay, good. 好，谢谢。那请周博士。
就是我大学的专业叫人工智能与自动化，然后这其实是一个偏硬件的专业，然后它大概是有15%的女生的比例。然后博士期间就是叫电子与计算机工程，然后我同学中的比例大概是11%出头，然后后来就是做研究期间，然后我们会参加一些比如说电子与电气工程师学会这样的一些我有加入一些那个 我们叫 TC Committee， 叫 Technical Committee， 就是说我们会去负责会议中间的某一些专业的一些论文的一些这种事情，然后可能大概有10几个 committee 这样。然后我还特意去查了一下，然后我发现我们那个 committee 大概是从2000年就有了，但是它就是我看了它每年的那个 annual report， 然后它直到2022年才有 gender distribution 这一项，之前都没有这一项，就没有人关注。然后2022年和2023年都是9%，对，大概是这么一个比例。然后在科技企业中，我觉得还是好像会更好一点，因为科技企业中的话，就是本来就是有不同的职位的人嘛，然后可能我的专业也会更偏工科、更偏硬件一点。然后这样的话，我觉得好像在企业里面的女性会比我就是在科研中的比例还要多一点，我觉得还是比较欣慰的一个现象。尤其是我们企业比较巧，我们2个创始人都是女性，所以就会有一点不同。
在工程领域本身呢？
工程领域本身，您说企业的工程领域本身，可能20%，会比科研好，但是当然也是一个就是 man dominant 的 field， 对。
你说到这个2022年开始出现的这个新现象，可喜可贺啊，
是，
但同时也反映出我们的这个意识，与此同时呢，以及现在的一个现状。其实我们在这里啊，不光是谈论问题的，我们先要把问题解释清楚，然后我们要找到解决方案。我还想请教刘敏浩女士哈，刘女士，我听说呢，在这个西湖大学，你们设立了一系列的理工学科的专业，我不知道在这些专业当中，女生的参与度如何？与此同时，我们的女性的教授、讲习师等等这样的一些比例到底如何？
First of all, I'm very glad to be here.
All right. Okay. So we
That's
can
okay.
also speak in English.
Yeah, it's fine. So I learned a lot about the overall statistics, the data on women in STEM. At Westlake University, from our last year's data, about 41% of our faculty and staff are female, and among them, a third are female faculty and postdocs. It's not a huge number, but Westlake University is quite new. Please allow me to briefly introduce Westlake University. It's a very young university, and this year actually marks its 5th anniversary since its formal establishment in 2018. It is the first type of new type research university in China, and I think it's the first in modern China. It is supported by both public and private fundings, and it is implies this system called the system headed by university president under the governance of the board of trustees. So since from day one, the board of trustees, the academic committee, as well as our president, they are very supportive to the development of our female faculty, the career development for the female faculty. I'll talk more about that later on, that what we have done for them. Yes, thank you.
Talk about it right now.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, yes. Because we have fundings from both public and private source, and we formally launched this for Women of Westlake in Science program last year. And this program is generously supported by VIP Shop. Wei Pinghui is from donating. And we started this fellowship, the postdoc fellowship selection last year, and we have already had 3 very outstanding recipients for that fellowship, female fellowship. I think this all helps. Yes.
您觉得呢，周女士？我想请教您，您觉得是什么样的方法？比如说从教育到我们本身的科技创新企业，哪些的真正的政策或者是方式方法能够真正鼓励女性在这个科技领域进一步的走实走好， 走高啊？简单说一下。
好，谢谢。就是我觉得我一路走来还是获得了很多支持。然后首先就是我记得是当时就是在读书的时候，学校里面是有专门的Women Center 的，就它有很多不同的 center， 比如说 Asian Pacific Island Center， 然后 Women Center 也是一个比较大的 center。然后尤其是我们就是读工科嘛。工科，然后会有一个专门的 Women in STEM 这样的一个组织，然后他们去办活动。然后不仅如此，然后当时因为我自己当时就是还会在学生会里面，然后办一些活动，比如说我们会有办，这个叫 imposter syndrome， 他的意思是说很多人会觉得我在这个环境里，但是我好像配不上这个环境的这么一种心理状态，然后。很多时候的这种状态，其实女性会比男性更多一点。然后我们会去专门办这种的imposter syndrome 的 workshop， 然后去给到一些有这样心理的一些支持。对，然后在科研领域，其实现在很多这种科研组织，他们会有一个专门的women chapter， 就比如说我们是属于电子与电气工程。师协会里面的叫 Circuit and Society， 然后它会专门有一个 Women in Circuit and Society， 然后每次办活动的话，会有一个专门针对这个的活动，然后还有专门针对女性的一些奖项的设置。对这些东西，我觉得有的时候可能只是一些大家每个人的一些经历的分享，大家同样不管是在学习还是科研还是工作中碰到一些压力，但是很多时候这种分享会给我们很大的支持。对。
以一种组织的方式，在这个建构当中提供更多的支持啊。
是。
Ms. Choden, I know UNDP has been devoting the agenda also in the STEM area. Tell me more about what are some of the policies you think are crucial in this regard to support. Ms. Choden.
Oh, sorry, I was, yeah, so based on our experiences across the region, it seems that, I guess all stakeholders have a very important role to play, starting from, the educators, to technological firms, research institutions. But some of the areas that would require policy intervention would be also in the areas of education. There's also lack of mentorship and networking to encourage women and girls to be in the areas of STEM and technology. Also, I think, many of the highly technological advanced companies, there seems to be, some kind of lack in the workplace environment, like the one of the keynote speakers also mentioned, work-life balance, gender responsive, parental leaves, a safe and inclusive environment, policies on gender-based violence and sexual abuse could also help a lot in women getting into that sector. And of course, research and partnership. For example, when we develop programs to support women researchers who have taken breaks due to family reasons. So how do we integrate them into the research community? These are really something that might need, concerted effort, but as well as targeted interventions. And then also, the way to create role models in society. But according to the recent UNDP Social Norms Index, which was done across almost 89 countries, it was found that 90% of both men and women have biases against, women. So this also is something that needs to be addressed. And then, like I said, it is not just the role of one stakeholder, but it needs a holistic approach where all the stakeholders need to come together to support interventions and policies. Okay. Thank you.
All right, I think let's move on to some of the crucial points that all of you have mentioned. The one is lack of investment grants to support women in science and technology. The other is lack of awareness in our society to bring more women onto the scene. And the third is how to understand overall speaking, the social responsibilities of women and other genders in building together a more balanced world. I think we will go through some of these points very briefly from every one of you. First of all, about investment. Ms. Liu, you already talked about a special grant in the Westlake University to support women. You know, latest example of that, the Nobel Prize winner, we have heard about her story once and again. She has no grant. She was being kicked out several times, and you know, but eventually groping her way back, and winning the award. But it's very hard to imagine she will be able to be a Nobel Prize winner without such a high level of societal discussion about gender equity at all. So under the current circumstances, what are some of the inspiration we should get for special investment, funding, and grants for women scientists and for nurturing young women in the field? Ms. Liu, you want to add anything to what you already said? If you do, let's briefly.
Yes, thank you very much.
And then I'll invite all the others also
Yes.
to have your input.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, for Dr. Kariku's experience, of course, it definitely sheds light on like so many challenges that female scientists are facing during their fund application, during their career development. I used to be one of them. I used to be one of the female researchers. I used to work in Tsinghua University as a postdoc.
In the field of,
sorry,
是哪一个领域？哪一个
life
学科？
sciences, life
Okay.
sciences. In this area, the area that I'm more familiar with, I think when I'm on my graduate students period of time, I think the male and female, the percentage, their ratio is more or less 50-50. But as the development of our career stage, it's just a lot of female researchers are lost at the postdoctoral phase. But when it comes to the assessment for funding application, I think the whole system, like what we are doing today, and also the policies, we're trying to create a situation or system that is, we say, merit-based system for funding application for project assessment, but still we can see a lot of leakage. That's why at Westlake University, we have this specifically designed program that we hope we can sponsor our early career female scientists, especially at their postdoctoral fellow stage. I think this is very important. Yeah, very young age. Yeah, thank you very much.
Early career.
Yeah, early career
Support,
stage.
financial support already for them to
Yes.
grow. Thank
Yeah.
you. And Holder, you want to have any input about investment, funding, grants? So what might be some of the best ideas?
Yeah, so in the European Union, the program that I'm working for, which is Horizon Europe, is one of the biggest funding schemes in the world for research in any different field. And it, at this point, has included this really, really deep gender dimension. And I can maybe like take a quick look at how it looks like over there, just to sort of think about that a little bit. It used to be the case that they would like encourage there to be like a women participation in this, and that's not the case anymore. What they're encouraging right now and what they're trying to prioritize right now is 50-50 participation. They want to see both men and women equally in these grants that are being given to these big projects. As a part of that now.
Even though there's a debate about quota.
Yeah, well, I mean, like it's encouragement, but they need to explain themselves why they do it in a certain way. So every different kind of grant right now, and every higher education institution needs to provide a thing which is called a gender equality plan when they're applying for this, where they kind of like look into how they're going to deal with the gender dimension, etc. when it comes to this. On top of that, obviously, a lot of schemes, not only Europe, are also trying to take into account the different family situations and the circumstances that women are facing. For example, Marie Curie, the Marie Curie scheme that we have allows for some flexibility when people have children, etc., in terms of timelines and other things like this, as well as other family support. And also, in every single research topic that is being funded by the European Union right now, there's this requirement that there needs to be a gender consideration on what's being researched and studied. So that is also another element of it. You're not only thinking about the female scientists, but also how science is looking at gender, etc. So there's supposed to be this gender dimension in every single, even if it's just physics or whatever. And what I thought was interesting, the way that they framed it was like, they're saying, well, if you don't think there should be a gender dimension to what you do, then you need to make that case. You need to then like try to explain why you wouldn't include something like that, which is like a different point of view to start from. The project that I belong to, Euraccess, is sort of a career advancement, career development facilitation in the European Union. And over there, they have all kinds of different we have like over 500 centers that help researchers to sort of advance their career and develop them. And a lot of that is focusing on women researchers, because a lot of the times what they do need is an extra support, etc. And that's something that we try to do.
I see. So Minhao emphasized on earlier career development. And you have been talking about, the overall comprehensive policy, even looking at quota as one of the way to go, yeah?
Well, they don't have a quota, but they have an encouragement. Like they want to see a 50-50 on average. That's
on the horizon, yes.
Yeah, until like when it comes to these things.
Wonderful.
I think it's reasonable.
Okay, Anastasia, what is your input? Investment, grants, and funding, what is the best way to get women more onto the road?
I think we have to start with the mentoring system. Basically, if we have experienced women that have been exposed to the challenges in the male dominant sector, especially in the STEM field, that can navigate through the obstacles that they faced and form a support to the new young scientists that are coming into this field. And also it would be a very good benefit for across China, but around the world, is to have a platform of best practices of mentoring system. What has worked through the mentoring system? Can that system be implemented in the institute that we're in? Because we're quite a unique institute. We're China and US joint venture. So the exposure and the grants that we apply, sometimes we don't get through due to that factor. So if there is a mentoring platform that communicates all these best practices, would help tremendous. Also, I will echo what Holger said with the European Union. The European Molecular Biology Organization and also Marie Curie and FEBS have made an amazing calls for women, young women, to go into research, but also a mentoring system in place as well. Now, how that mentoring system has worked, I do not have the data for that, but it shows that there is a grant, but also a mentoring system attached to the call. And that shows that, okay, you get a grant, and then how do you grow as a scientist? What are the obstacles that you face, and how can you navigate through these obstacles? It's part of the challenge that we face as we grow to a higher level of,
right.
And also I want to make a good practice that the Wellcome Trust is doing at the moment. They're doing a research career re-entry fellowship. For instance, like many speakers have said, women have to take care of other people or sick or the children, or they change work complete from the stem cell sector, but they want to come back into there because that's their passion, right? And having that fellowship enables women to go onto courses, go into workshops, go into seminars, conferences, because it's really hard once you get 1 year or 2 years out of your research to get back on the horse, as we could say, to start your research again and your team. But having that sort of fellowship tailored for that specifically group will enable women to re-enter STEM sector again. And that will be so beneficial. And also the panelists. When we apply for, I had an personal experience where my proposal got selected to the Jiangsu province, and we had to defend it to the Beijing government through the Nanjing sector. And the panelists, out of the 15 panelists, only 3 women represented the proposal reviews. So that's something that we can look into, like change a policy of having male, equal gender representation for reviewing these proposals.
So you suggested 3 things. One is platform for people to exchange the best practices and ideas so that we can get inspirations from one another, even though we could be in very unique cases when we talk about our own university or research institution. Secondly, you want to establish certain kinds of fellowships that would support women to come back after their family and issues and be able to get inspired again and getting a starting point again. That's another. The other thing you mentioned is to have certain kinds of policies in terms of how policymakers are being made up. The percentage of policymakers of women in deciding some of the crucial policies regarding women in science and technology is also crucial. I guess this is a mutually encouraging process, as you just talked about. Okay, so let's move on to Ms. Zhou. Do you have any specific suggestions regarding investment, grants, funding for women in science and technology, and encouraging more women into the field?
有，
有则长说，无则短说。好，
因为我之前是科研嘛，然后现在在创业，然后我自己的感受就是，其实很多人觉得就是科研和商业有很大的区别，但其实它是本质上相似的。就是创业的话，或者商业的话，你是在向大家selling a story， 你是想尝试说服大家说5年之后你可以给在这个社会带来一点推动。那科研可能是说20年或者30年之后，甚至50年之后，你做的研究能够对这个社会有一点推动。那其实很多人觉得科研就是一板一眼，然后非常的严格，非常的谨慎，但是说它其实也是非常有趣的一个事情，然后它也是一个需要天马行空的一个 idea 的一些事情。所以说我的感受是，好像女性在不管是商业还是科研上，对于就是selling a story 或者是跟大家说你的一个 big vision 的时候，其实是更加保守的。然后其实我的感受就是就是我们是可以 dream big， 然后我们也是可以做到非常不错的事情，然后我觉得这是一个我现在最大的感受吧。
确实女性的这个谦虚谨慎啊，可以说在这个社会上呢是一个比较有特点的一个现象啊。那当我们有120%的时候，我们会说到100%；我们有100%的时候，我们往时会说到70%。拍照的时候，我们都站在旁边啊。聊天的时候，我们要等到最后一位发言啊。其实从一定程度来说，这是美德啊，因为我们谦虚。但是呢，在不同的场合这种谦虚的美德如何来进行分享啊？同时呢，让大家又看到我们身上真正具有的那些风采。我想这个呢，可能确实是一个我们女性都要好好讨论的话题。同时呢，也应该让更多的社会各界理解到女性性格当中的一些特点。We are as good, if not better。对，这个是非常重要的。刚才我们也听到了很多嘉宾，他们说到，其实女性对自己的尊重、对自己的了解、自己的肯定、自己的信心和自己的尊重，就如同社会和其他各个方面需要做到的一样重要。好，谢谢 ，Thank you. It's a very important point. So we have very limited time, but our conversation could go on for like a whole day, right? So how can we make it happen? One of the things women, when we are together with a very constructive passion of gentlemen, is that we try to put things together and try to seek the best solution. So why don't we talk about both the social challenges and also about the policy approach and the societal awareness for these social challenges together in terms of women, putting women more onto the scene of science and technology development. So 周老师啊，我这想请教你，因为你是创业嘛，可能你在每天的工作和生活当中感受的最深刻。到底我们社会上对女性，特别是女性科技工作者、女性科技创业者，他们有一些什么样的印象啊？比如说，他们可能一想，哎，我今天要跟周小姐见个面啊，她要找我来寻找一些新的资金啊，她要跟我聊一聊未来的一些发展。你觉得他们可能脑海里当中反映出来的形容词是什么呢？
我是因为我的名字和声音都还比较中性，所以说见我面之前，他们都会觉得我是个男生。
不会了，我不觉得呀，您的声音很美啊。
然后每次见面的时候，因为我和我的创始人都是女性，2个女生。
他们会这么讲哈。但如果2位男性的创始人，他们就不会说2个男生，
就是觉得很正常。
对，这是一个表面现象了。但是其实你觉得在更深一次挖掘，在社会上，我们说在我们的家庭生活当中，你觉得其实大家可以在哪些角度有更深刻的理解啊？
就是我的感受是，就是这种对于女性和男性的社会分工是确实这个偏见是无孔不入的。就像刚刚汪红院长他也分享了那个生活中广告的那个例子嘛。他说就是男生的广告就是名表、名车、豪宅，什么香槟之类的，然后可能女生就是油盐酱醋，然后家居，然后这些，然后可能就像或者从小长到大，大家都会说，哎，男生的后劲比较强，然后女生就不适合学理科等等这些问题，它其实它是非常细微的一些评论，但是它很有可能就在每一次你想去争取一个工作机会，每一次你面临一个人生选择的时候，你可能就会泄那么一口气。然后我觉得这个对人的影响还是非常非常深重的，就是观念，我觉得还是最重要的一个事情。对，然后我的感受就是可能真的有非常多的一些女性榜样楷模站出来会改变人的很多想法，比如说诺贝尔奖得主，比如说今天在这里的各位院士啊、院长啊，还有您这样优秀的主持人啊之类的。
其实各领域的优秀女性应该更多的进行沟通，让大家有相互更多的力量，同时向社会释放出我们更好的正能量。谢谢。Anastasia, your thoughts?
I have to, agree.
You're a new mom. I just
yes,
learned.
yes.
I'm sure you have a very different perspective.
Well, it's like, when do you have a family as a scientist? Do you have it at the beginning of your career or towards a more senior career? And there's no really right answer. I mean, she's 2 years old now, and the roles have changed. My husband now is a full-time nanny. And I was reading a paper recently it's published in Nature, and about 40% of women with first child leave the STEM field sector and to either change completely or go part-time. And only 23% of men will go part-time to help in my case, I'm very fortunate that my husband supports my career and my mission and my passion in science. And it has been quite challenging.
How did you find him? That's very crucial.
Yes.
So we need to have platforms for
Have
exchanges
policies.
about that too. Yeah, it's very crucial. Yeah,
It's-
and always being that way consistently.
Yeah, he's an exception, and I really do thank him for that every day. But I mean, I as a mother, and I speak for most women, they want to be involved in the early development of their child. And being a scientist, I mean, I want to inspire her in the STEM field sector. So, I brought her the quantum physics and gravity and evolution and biology textbooks at this stage of her life. But having a policy, and some of them have been communicated this morning on a family leave or flexible hours. Also, the Wellcome Trust, which is one of an amazing example that can be implemented either in an institutional or a governmental policy, is having these fellowships that we can, use these funding and having a grace period in our research and our growth in
Right.
our science as well. And also it should we shouldn't be penalized of having a family, especially in academia, because academia does not wait. Research does not wait. It is just a fast pace. And once you're out of the loop, it is so difficult to get back. And it takes a lot of support from the institute as well, but also on the governmental part as well.
What you're saying is very crucial, starting from individually be able to establish a structure back at home in the family life to share the same kinds of vision about what a family should be and the roles of men and women. And meanwhile, setting a great example for the next generation by yourself, by teaching by acting, so that they understand that there are great potential for everybody, including girls.
Absolutely.
Very touching, I think, in your
Thank you.
story. And I want to communicate with you about finding the right one after this conversation. And that will be off the record.
I'll ask his, yeah.
Okay, so let's go to Min Hao. I want to also ask you specifically, because everybody has already talked about all of these grand challenges as we do. So go to you, also a specific solution. You are in the educational field. You are helping to set up the policies
Yes.
in the university. So what are the things to be done?
First of all, I didn't leave science because of family or because of any difficulties, but I personally think what I'm doing now is more suitable and maybe more meaningful for the Westlake University. And I echo with Dr. Zhou. I think women often needs to fight with the confidence crisis. So that's why I mentioned the program, the For Women of Westlake in Science program. And the first step of this program is to sponsor the early career stage female scientists. I think at that stage, they really need to build up their confidence. I recall one of our recipients from last year of the fellowship, Dr. Huang Jing, and she mentioned to us, she seldom applied for any awards or any fellowship during her whole education. But I was really glad that she applied for this For Women one, because we encouraged her. And not just that, she received it. And she said this validates her long term of hard working on her research. I think this is what we do is really meaningful. Yes.
I congratulate you on that, because a lot of women that I got to know are really outstanding in their fields, but they are also very grateful person. Once they got the support from someone, some organizations or family members, they're gonna put all their efforts to,
Yes.
to quote unquote pay back, not necessarily, but really to show their gratefulness.
Yes.
I think that's a great virtue of women, by the way. We don't want to exclude this wonderful gentleman sitting with us here, but Powder, please, and tell us more about what do you think might be some of the most important areas we need to work on with examples you have in terms of supporting women, societally speaking, and also make sure the gap of understanding gender equity in science and technology is going to be reduced smoothly.
I think we can sort of start with ourselves a little bit. I come from Iceland, and one of the things that I grew up with was we had the first women president in the world. And throughout my whole career, I've always had this really strong women leaders. My first boss was a woman, and like so on and so on. And when I started this job about 10 years ago, I had this woman boss who told me how we were trying to put together a panel like you're doing right now. And she said, there's only men on this panel that I had prepared. So I said, can we find at least one woman to put on there? And I was not sure how to feel about that, because, the merit-based and blah, 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 you find the best and everything. And then she said, like, okay, so look at all of them. She went through like all of these different panels that had taken place. And there was like panel after panel after panel of only men. So there's just no good women out there. Clearly not. Clearly the problem is, in this case, me, right? Because I was the one putting together yet another male panel in that case. I had to step in and just like think to myself, why am I picking all these guys? Well, it's because like they're out there and they're contacting me and they're very visible to me and they come to my mind, and I have to adjust how I think about this. So I try now to not have this happen as much as I can. And I'm really extremely happy to be the only guy on a panel for once. That's very unusual. So like, yeah, I think it starts with social attitudes like this. I also think it's worth it to look at the systematic change. Earlier, we had Professor Wang Yanfen talk about the new Nobel Prize laureate, the Claudia Goldin, who looked at the labor market. I was listening to her yesterday, and there's like a couple of things that jumped at me. First of it was the question about what she called greedy jobs. I don't know if you heard this word, greedy jobs. Well, before explaining to it, I just want to tell you, being a researcher is what is like the definition of greedy job. It needs you to be there always. You cannot really take a break if you want to advance. And she talks about non-linear reward system. So like the longer you stay, the more you get paid, and like non-linearly, you get like paid more per hour if you stay always like this. So there's like this huge penalty to have to go away. So she says within a relationship, like you were just describing earlier, you have to be strategic, and at least one of the person needs to pick a non-linear job if the whole family wants to be earnings at all. It ends up being the woman a lot of the time. Well, there's a couple of things you can think about. You could like, oh, maybe the guy could be the caregiver, and sometimes that could be the case. But also, does academia need to be greedy? Does that necessarily lead to excellent science all the time? We've talked about this earlier, how we say like, oh, the best researchers are the ones that like work the hardest or something like that.
Right.
But if we have diversity of thought and opinions and views, et cetera. Somebody mentioned earlier this morning, wasn't it like this MIT person that says like women tend to think about these problems a lot differently? Are we sure that we're not losing a lot of merit by not adjusting the systems?
Absolutely, absolutely. Some of the policies that we have got used to actually have been formed without the gender lens. And therefore, they are not the right policies. They are not the best practices. So what we need to do now is to really complement what we already had, and with a much more enriched perspective with the contribution of women, and bearing in mind the contribution that women can make to our whole society. Lastly, we are really running out of time. Very briefly from every one of you, about what do you see are some of the most important priorities? It's like, just very briefly, that we need to have as conclusion for this panel. I will not, as the moderator, to give the conclusion, but rather all of you. Let's go with Ms. Choden first.
Yeah.
Ms. Choden.
Thank you. So I would like to, send this message that to support young technical women and girls in technology, and especially from an economic perspective, to support their startups. Startups are getting very popular now, and women-led startups, if the private sector could put in their investment there, I think this will go a long way in encouraging and having more women in the field of science and technology. So a lot of investments from private sector, I would say, to support women-led startups in technology.
Thank you, Ms. Choden, and also for your enthusiasm, that of the great work of UNDP in the region and beyond, of course, in China, on this issue. Thank you for putting the spotlight. And let me go to you, Powder.
Yeah.
What needs to be done most urgent? Okay, let's go.
So I trust my colleagues in Europe and the institutions that are working really hard on that, from the Nordic countries down to Brussels, etc., to continue the work on trying to make for a fair science when it comes to gender dynamics. Personally, though, I am committed, and especially after this event, that during this quarter, I want to work a lot more harder within Euraccess China to give voices to women. So I have already a couple of ideas how to work on it, and this is something that I want to do, because where else should we start?
Right. Great idea. So now we are already at the time of personal commitment. So please, Minha.
I think at Westlake University, one of our mission is to explore new paths, is to chart ways towards more inclusive science policies and ecosystem, especially micro ecosystem at Westlake University. And what we can do is we never stop trying. I think what we need to do is we do not stop. I think these incremental changes we put the forces that we put together every day by all of us, the collaborative efforts will impact the society eventually at some point of one day.
Thank you so much. And Anastasia.
Through today's talks, we see we've done small steps to the right direction, and I want to continue that. As an educator, I have freshmen, which is an integrated science that they come from different backgrounds. They've never done biology, they've never done chemistry, they've never done physics. And I have this great opportunity to inspire the new generation to pursue a career in STEM field sector. So this is my role, is to inspire and to continue and to promote women in science and to celebrate these amazing women that are currently with us today as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Peng.
我还是想说，就是a big achievement come from like big dream, and then either men or women, we need to sell ourselves.
说得好，好，谢谢我们今天的所有的现场和线上的嘉宾。I want to thank every one of you, both here in person and online, for this wonderful discussion. I think there's a lot of positive energy coming out of this conversation. I'm sure we're going to digest that during the lunchtime. But before we go, we also have another speech. 我们还有另外一个最后一个上午的环节和大家进行分享。但是 for now, I want to thank all of you. Thank you so much.谢谢我们的工作人员啊，非常麻利啊，还有2位女生，我看她们也很有肌肉，搬那个沙发很有力量啊。Thank you so much, all the girls also for taking the sofa and everything. 好，接下来我们进入到今天上午的最后一个环节哈。今天上午的最后一个环节呢，是一位重要的嘉宾给我们带来的一个相关的重要的演讲。我们在最后一个环节特别关注聚焦粮食系统当中的性别差距与科技的作用。我们希望能够邀请到台上来今天的演讲嘉宾，联合国粮食与农业组织的项目官员董乐。董乐呢是从2018年加入联合国粮农组织，主管伙伴关系和创新，同时呢负责联络和维护合作关系及统筹创新项目，希望他给我们带来更多的思考。我们有请董乐先生。
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It is a great pleasure for me to be the second male speaker of this morning. First of all, thank you, Beate, UNDP, for the kind invitation of FAO to this event. So I know it's approaching lunchtime. I will be very quick and concise because FAO, my organization, works for zero hunger. So without further ado, I will start my sharing. So this morning, we've heard a lot of gender gaps in the science, technology, in the scientific research food. So now I would like to take you to the food and agriculture system because we are what we eat. So this is very critical topic. So the first report FAO published globally on the gender gaps in the agriculture sector was about 12 years ago. So in the state of food and agriculture published in 2010 to 2011. And the second report published is this year. It's the status of women in the agri-food system. So as you can see from the title, this year we covers not only agriculture, but also the whole food systems, covers not only the production, but also the processing, distribution, and consumption, all the different stages of the value chain. So the key message I want to share from this slide is that since 2011, while some gender gaps have already been reduced, little or no progress has been achieved in others. So now I will give you a more detailed numbers on this. As you can see, first in the middle is globally 36% of working women work in the agriculture food systems. So this is also coincides with the 1/3 principle that we already shared and heard today. And the second number is 66% of women's employment is in the agricultural food system compared with 60% of men in the same sector. And in some regions, this gender gap is more wider. And the gender gap, the green one, the gender gap in the land productivity gives us a very shocking fact, which is that the female-led or managed farm in comparison with the male managed farm, and they have the less productivity, about 24%. Does it mean that the male has more productivity? No, it doesn't mean that. It means the female farmers, they are lack of or have limited access to the agricultural inputs, technologies, financial services, etc. So that gives us a very alarming warning that we have to really work on this gender gap in the agriculture food system. And the last but not least, you could see from the yellow one, maybe you could not see, but I will read. The woman engaged in the wage employment in the agriculture earns only 82 cents in comparison if the man earns $1. So also there's a salary gap in the agricultural food systems. So now I would like to move on to this gendered agriculture food system. If you're interested, you could search, download this report with more details. But in general, the technology serves as one of the key drivers to close the gender gap in the agriculture food system. And in general, women do not benefit as much as men in the system. And here I will give you some more detailed sector facts. For example, women held only 15% of the full-time positions in the aquaculture sector. And in the forestry sector, and women are more likely to be working under the informal work. And also the most profitable breeds in the livestock sector are often controlled by men. So in general, women and men differs in their access to the productivity, to their materials, to the services. So this slide presents some of the three indicators that we captured in the report. One is the female farmers continue to have less access to the extension services, which means they have less training or capacity development opportunities in comparison with men on the pesticides management, soil, fertilizer, etc. And the second figure shows their gender gap in the mechanization. So which is another very important sector for to close the gender gap. And there are some examples. As you may know, mechanization is very helpful to increase the productivity in the agriculture. But sometimes, because of the design of the mechanization is not very user-friendly to female. So this could also create some of the gender gaps in the application of some of the mechanization. And the second is, in some of the labor-intensive sector, probably it is women-dominated. But thanks to the mechanization, maybe the women became jobless. So how we could use the policy, inclusive policy and incentives to keep the women, they do not lose the job to be replaced by the mechanization. And also another example is talking about mechanization, we're now talking about a lot about digital technologies like the AI and big data. And because of the gender bias data, or there's lack of gender disaggregated data, so maybe the data inputs to the agricultural system is already gender biased. So how we can address this issue is a very new topic and a very new challenge. And the third figure showed that access to the mobile internet has already increased recent years, but last year, the gender gap started to enlarge with 1%. So let's all work together to close the gender gaps in the agricultural systems. And here are some of the key messages we took from the report. We have to pay attention to the capacity development because of the gender gaps in the rural area. And also the education and training are extremely important to strengthen the women's access to the technologies, etc. And also the design of the technology should also consider the preferences and constraints of the woman, like the example I mentioned in the mechanization. Last but not least, nowadays we have lots of digital technology, like the AI, like the big data, and also the digitalization of the financial services could also improve the access of the woman to the financial services. But at the same time, how do we address, not to enlarge the gap, but to shorten the gap? That's the challenge. So science technology in general has a lot to do to help us reduce the gender gap in the agricultural systems. So there are lots of roles we could mention about the technologies in the agriculture, and the FAO has already published lots of reports on the gender gaps in the different sectors, like the aquaculture, fishery, in the climate smart agriculture, in the pesticides management. At the same time, there are lots of opportunities emerging from the new technologies, like the drones, like the Internet of Things, like the AI, like big data. So how we can be sure all these technologies are not enlarging the gender gap in these different sectors of the agricultural food system is a new topic that we all have to be very careful. So this year's of International Women's Day has picked the topic that digital innovation and technology for gender equality. I think that's a very good message that in line with today's of my sharing. And also this year's Commission on the Status of Women also selects the topic of innovation and the technology, change education in the digital era. So how we can make sure the digital technologies will be helpful for us to reduce the gender gap. And also FAO published lots of key messages under this CSW. I will just repeat the keywords like the gender disparity in access to ICT in this agricultural food system is not very encouraging. So let's all work on that. Second is comprehensive policies programs have to take into the consideration of these gender gaps in their design. Last but not least, all the strategies, policies, plans, budgets have to go through towards the same direction. So that's the three key messages from FAO. And now I would like to quickly share of some of the work FAO is doing in China in collaboration with the UN Women. Just some of the preliminary findings from the report. As we all know, rural female farmers are very key elements for our rural revitalization. There's a key number I want to share. About 70% of China's rural labor force are actually women. So how we can reduce the gender gaps in China's agriculture and food system is a very critical challenge for everybody. So this report, we try to address the issue on how digital finance and e-commerce could empower China's rural women to achieve better livelihoods and contribute better to the rural revitalization. So I will go very quickly, these two slides that we found some very good positive impacts from the e-commerce, from the rural digital finance on the rural woman. So we found lots of very good case studies, best practices from the government, from the private sector, and from the academia, supporting our argument that the e-commerce could contribute to the improvement of the gender, to reduce the gender gaps in China. And also the same argument is also from the digital finance as well. we found that they could be provide as a very alternative opportunity for rural women in China to have a better access to financial services. And last but not least, we still also have to highlight some of the remaining barriers from lots of dimensions, like from the policy level, from the internet application level, but also for the financial service coverage, because there are some common challenges we also found in China, also with other developing countries, like the low ownership rate of bank accounts among the rural women in China, which is very common, globally speaking, etc. So we also would like to highlight, with all these challenges, there are lots of potentials. We could all work together to tap all these potentials. I will not go to the details, but last but not least, I want to share my key takeaway message of my sharing is let's all work together to develop a gender responsive or gender inclusive science and technology to close the gender gaps in the China's and beyond the agriculture food systems. Thank you all very much.
谢谢董乐先生高效的分享哈，因为他坚信他所在组织的一个重要的宣言，那就是 Zero Hunger 哈。在午餐之前呢，我们非常简短的总结一下今天上午的会议，通过我们的主题演讲、主旨演讲以及嘉宾的发言，还有我们的讨论，大家能够感受到，其实在这个领域，我们大家都有了更加具体的想法。同时呢，大家也有一种互相给予的力量。那么在今天的整个活动当中呢，我想都会体现出来。另外一点呢，就是这样的交流是多么的重要。One of my key takeaways is so crucial to have interactions like this, that we are not only just talk about it on paper, but coming together itself is already tremendous energy. And be able to come up with some specific suggestions and talk about and sharing our own actions in achieving what we all have as the common aspiration. I think this is so important. So thank you everyone. 谢谢每一位今天参会的各位朋友们，谢谢你们给我们大家带来的这样的一种正能量。谢谢各位，我们下午再会。下午的会议应该是2点开始，我们还有相关的讨论和发言。谢谢。